Welcome, everyone. My name is Magdalena Cichoń, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak today about a very interesting topic that concerns diversity and inclusion. Just a few words about myself. Actually, my adventure with agility and with Agile is quite fresh. My background is in law firms. So for a few years, I was a business developer of legal services. And after some time, I decided to change my path a little bit, go to Agile. So I went through a mentoring program. And then I decided to join a company that offers consultancy services and training and workshops. And currently, I'm the specialist and project leader when it comes to sales and marketing and promotion of Agile world, so to speak. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, that has been my passion and my interest since many years. So when I joined Agile PMO and I stumbled across the Agile world, so to speak, I got interested in how agility is linked to diversity and inclusion. And also seeing how many of our clients and also individuals who are joining our workshops and courses, I can see that they're missing this point, and we were also missing this point. So I thought that, okay, this is interesting to actually dive into and to look for more opportunities and to see what we're actually missing. So today we will be talking about the changes that are happening. So the world is actually going through that tsunami, we could say, and many organizations have to transform. They have to adjust, and and things like an aspect like, for example, reskilling, upskilling, and also being more innovative. So all these things are now in stake, and diversity and inclusion is one of the aspects that is becoming more and more popular for not only for organizations and HR departments, but mostly for business strategies. So first of all, let's start with quickly defining what is diversity and inclusion. As you can see, maybe you've seen it before, it's Power Flower. So it's a popular exercise that is being done in many teams, but also it's also for individuals. The idea is based on the fact that you have to color different petals that address your situation. Here in this example, of course, we don't have all the aspects that diversity includes, because there are plenty of different aspects that you can have. But the idea behind this is to actually show you that the more petals you color, the more power and the more privilege you have. It doesn't mean that you have to be ashamed that you have more power than the others. No, it's just to prove that you actually, and that happens very often, that we don't realize how much power we actually have, and that with this power we can actually make changes. So this is diversity. Inclusion is the act of actually welcoming those diverse aspects and being open to them. And the third aspect is equity. It means that equity takes care of setting up systems and policies to make everyone feel equal, and to react when any disabilities or inequalities appear. So moving on, why actually to care about this diversity and inclusion? There are plenty of reports on the market that you could have probably seen about how more innovative and groundbreaking are the companies that are including or introducing diversity and inclusion. One of the reports that I can also recommend is McKinsey report from last year. And it refers to women in boards. And it clearly stated that those companies that have more than 30% women on boards are much more successful, and they're outperforming those companies that have less. I can only tell you, as one of my interests is, of course, diversity and inclusion, and I'm volunteering in an organization. It's an international organization, but they're new to Poland. It's called 30% Club. And the idea is to actually act to have more women in boards. And you might find it surprising or not that actually only 5% of the companies that are on the Polish stock exchange have more than 30% women on their boards. But anyway, we're talking about women, and now I want to move actually to all the diversity. So I picked here two different numbers. You can see that they might be quite contradictory. So first, we have number from the Project Management Institute report, which says that 63% of respondents placed a high priority on fostering a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is true, and this is what I also said at the beginning, that we're going through the turbulent times and companies need to adjust. And diversity and inclusion is one of the aspects that is helping this by attracting new talent, by diversifying the product portfolio, etc., etc. So here we have it. Then we have a number from the Business Agility Institute report that says that 52% of respondents said that they had been part of agile transformations where diversity and inclusion were not explicitly considered. There are a few things to take into account when comparing these two numbers. So the number from the PMI report, actually it looked at the organizations and leadership positions, while Business Agility Institute was looking at teams, employees, and co-workers. What it says that, or maybe you also have that, I have it quite often, that when I look at different organizations and their websites, nowadays almost everyone has the information, oh, we're diverse, we're inclusive. We really appreciate to have employees from different backgrounds, etc., etc. This is great. This is the very first step. However, when you dive deeper, you can see that there are none or very little initiatives or practices within the companies that actually support diversity and inclusion. And this is why it's seen here in the Business Agility Institute report. Another thing that we will go further is to actually see the link between Agile and diversity and inclusion. Now I will just give you a question for yourself to reflect before I move to the next slide. Have you ever considered, the link between diversity, inclusion, and agility? Do you think it's somehow, do these things relate to each other? And I'm asking this because very often we're missing this point, and I can see it with our clients that it's basically the same. So the answer is quite simple, I would say. It's one of the assumptions from the Agile Manifesto, saying that individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It's, now when we say it, when we read it, it seems like, okay, yes, of course, that's simple. And it's great, but we don't really think about it on an everyday basis. So there are a few things. First, we assume that because it's in the manifesto, then automatically Agile is inclusive and diverse. But is it really, we have a lot of assumptions about it. Another assumption is that we think, okay, so we're in an organization with agile organization using Scrum and other methods. And we're diverse and we're inclusive, and our HR department is taking care of this. Very often that's the case, not even in agile institutions, that we assume that the HR people will take care of making sure that the organization has the needed, so to say, practices, inclusive practices. And this is partially true because HR departments have to take into account all the government rules and procedures to make sure that we are hiring and of course that we are treating our team members and our employees on a equal basis. But again, that doesn't go any further. So we're talking about actually creating a culture of inclusiveness. And, on the one hand, of course, that we can say we're in line with the legal regulations, but that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, thanks to these legal regulations, we're actually creating the proper culture in our organization. So we have to then think about how we're really considering Agile in our teams, in our organizations. And in order to kind of inspire myself, also dive deeper into all these notions, I looked for I would say another perspective on Agile. And I found a person and actually a book called Agile People. The author Pia Maria Thoren, she's Swedish, and she's an Agile coach. She's also a founder of the Agile People community. You might have heard about it. And she looks at, she calls herself a radical person when it comes to HR and managers. And introducing agility. Her approach, I think, very well fits to what we're looking for. She's really underlining the fact that we should concentrate on people instead of processes. Although we all know, okay, Agile is about people, well, not necessarily, and we know that. And she goes one step further, saying that in a few years' time, if you apply Agile properly, instead of calling CEO as a chief calling CEO, you will be calling the person Chief Enabling Officer instead of Chief Executing Officer. And this is, and this is kind of the, I think, the direction that we should all be thinking about. Now, having these things in mind, I prepared 4 slides with 4 different sentences that are quite disbeliefs about diversity and inclusion and also Agile. So going further with the first one, saying very often we're hearing Agile is more inclusive and equitable than what came before it. Yes and no. First of all, we cannot really measure what's inclusive and equitable. So we cannot also measure what's more inclusive and equitable. We think that because, as we were discussing it previously, we assume that we're putting, people over processes, so that it means that, okay, so we're taking into account diverse needs of the people, but it's not necessarily like this. And again, I will also quote some of the numbers from the Business Agility Report, where they actually asked employees about Agile, and 17% reported that they directly witnessed exclusion and inequity, while the Agile transformations, and 26% believe that Agile itself could actively be excluding other people. So as you can see, we have to remember that we have to always implement Agile with the culture in itself. So to sum up, we can say that Agile is not necessarily more inclusive and equitable, but it has a potential to be like this if we make sure to take into account the culture of inclusiveness and diversity. Now, the next statement is saying we can teach everyone to be inclusive and equitable. Yes and no again. Of course, that we can invest in different workshops and training and conferences, and that's great. That's the first step to actually get into this. But again, there are some facts to take into account. So first of all, even the people who have been studying inclusiveness, diversity for many, many years are not able to acquire the knowledge of, of the whole depth and all the aspects of diversity. It's just too broad, and each of us is unique and has different needs. So it's not that we are going to know every single person and that we will understand this. Instead, the solution is to explain to everyone and make everyone understand that we are all different. We have all individual needs. We may not understand these special needs, but we will understand that the other person is different and they have full right to feel also differently than us. And that again comes back to the power flower, that we think, okay, so we are coloring different petals because we come from different backgrounds. So we will never be able to walk in the other shoes. So that's something to remember. And now moving on to the third statement, that we will adapt to someone's needs if they ask. Very often that's I can hear it from the leadership perspective. It's like, well, we're all the same. We don't need any additional policies. If someone is different, they will come. If, for example, there is a need from young parents, for example, or single mothers to team up and start a community where they will be exchanging, links to the places they can go or events for kids, etc. They should do it. That's not the way it usually is. And very often, people don't feel very much into disclosing their differences and diversities. They also have a feeling that the leadership at some point will actually react and that they will observe something. So again, it's all based on our assumptions, and it shouldn't be like this. Instead, the leaders, team leaders, and project leaders should be really communicating with their team members and with their individuals. They should be, just ask questions. It's not that difficult. But as long as you're asking, you're knowing what the person is, you'll be able to also define differences and diversities. And maybe on the other hand, you'll be also able to, create a new product for a new group of people that one of your team members is the part of. So this is something to also remember. And the last statement, that very often I also hear this. So it says that our leaders and product experts are making the correct decisions to support the needs of diverse populations. Great, this is great. And yes, we should think like that the leaders are actually being proactive. Sometimes they have been working with different people, with diverse communities. They have the everyday contact with different team members, so they should know. And then again, it comes back to our power flower and to the fact that diversity is so broad that none of us is able to be able to actually understand the core of the problem. So the solution here is that the leaders to actually speak to different communities, to not to be afraid to acquire additional knowledge from different team members. And I know then you will say, okay, but we don't have time for this and all that stuff. Yes, you won't have time probably, but you have to make the time. Because otherwise, again, we're assuming that we're doing the good job and that we are diverse and inclusive. But on the other hand, our clients and customers won't feel this way. And talking about customers and clients, now we all know that client is the heart of an agile organization, and we should take into account what they think, what are their needs, and what actually is their diversity and is their inclusion. It's important to connect with them. And by connecting with them, I'm not only talking with communicating, calling, being in touch, working on the same product, but actually by sharing the same culture. So that we have to make sure that our organization, our team members and employees, our leaders, and also our customers are on the same page and we share common values. So that it's not only about internal culture, but, and as many of you know and practice it on an everyday basis, it's also about showing how inclusive and diverse you and your organization are. So now you can go back and then reflect, is your team reflecting diversity of your customers really? Have you ever had any conversations like that with your customers? Or are you trying to implement any policies or initiatives that your customers have in their organizations, and you think that this might be interesting to also somehow implement in your organization? Okay. Now we're going to talk about agility and culture. So there is a link, as I was talking, between the customer and our organization. Many times I hear that people dislike agility and agile. Very often, even from my friends who work in different sectors, just name it, automotive, education, advertising, etc. They say, oh, agile, I hate it. I want to go back to my previous system. We don't know how to work. It's not working, etc., etc. And when you actually dive deeper in a conversation, you realize that it's not the case of agile. It's the case of how these organizations are adopting it. Because very often, many organizations transform into agile as this is, super trendy and fancy, and because others have it. But they make the very first mistake by not having the culture, not preparing their team members and employees to really introduce these changes, and having in mind that we have people who have been working in old-fashioned, so to speak, organizations with hierarchy, with political power, with many all these aspects that were that are not working in Agile, then it's very difficult for them to come into this innovative world where you have actually to, self-control, self-manage, when you have to self-organize. It's just not understandable for these people. And Agile won't be a quick fix for all these things. You need to have, and of course, on the one hand, you will have Agile coaches, which is great, but they won't be able to sit down and talk with every single person and, and understand their needs and their diversities and inclusions. Very often also Agile coaches don't see the link between Agile and diversity and inclusion. So I think this is also the starting point when even thinking about the transformation. And it's fine that not everyone has the knowledge, and this is also why we're thinking of introducing D&I coaches that could work together with Agile coaches. Now I would like to quickly stop us here and ask Anya to share a question on Slido. So I will quickly do stop share, and it will be great if you could quickly answer. So the question is, have you updated your D&I skills in the last 3 years? Yes, no, but I'm planning to. I'm just curious, how your organizations are approaching this this issue. So please do answer, and then we will. So we'll see. Great. So we see that 44% actually answered yes, which makes me very happy. Then 33 no, and 22 is planning to do that. Well, that's great. That is making me, very, very, very kind of positive about it. Okay. So we could see that 40% of you have actually gone through the training on D&I, and this is great. It's not, however, very common from what I hear from the organizations that come to our company to take this into account. But I also know that here we have the crowd who's actually interested in the topic. So it might also be interesting to ask a broader group of people. But anyway, so this is the question again, coming back to the fact that we were saying that very often companies put on their websites and everywhere in the promotion materials that, hey, we're so diverse and inclusive, but nothing actually stands behind the statement. So we need to make sure that we walk the talk. What D&I coaches can actually do, or to what extent they can ease the work of teams and organizations, so that we make sure that Agile is implemented properly. So first of all, they can of course make sure and be acting as mentors to all the team members, which also takes off the burden from the team members to, every time to know all the D&I perspectives and to really kind of be in the topic. Sometimes we don't have time for it. So this is why we need D&I coach who can actually give the helping hand and guide them through the whole process. So that's the first thing. And, going further, that's also the most important aspects that D&I coaches can actually bring a totally new perspective to the business, and they can also bring much more both diverse, inclusive, and proper organizational culture. I'm just thinking, some of you might be thinking, okay, so we have been going through the skills training and workshops, etc. And this is also great because I think that all the leaders, all the team leaders should be doing this. However, D&I coaches can be just somewhere next to you, also helping you and introducing you to new perspectives, and sometimes helping you notice that your team members belong to different communities, and or maybe sometimes they're too shy to talk about their diversity. Now, for example, you might have seen that there is a lot happening about neurodiversity, and I think it's a new topic for many organizations. And without an expert, you won't be able to really react quickly on these changes. So now actually moving to the recommendation section. So here I just I posted, reflect upon your own ways of working and unconscious biases to see whether exclusion may have influenced or marginalized your team members and customers. Definitely that's something to take from our discussion today, or from my presentation, to actually reflect on how you act on an everyday basis, and also how you communicate with your team, and that maybe you have in your team people from different diversity groups that you haven't noticed or observed yet, and maybe it would be just good and profitable also for your business to talk and to get to know them better. So this is definitely something to keep in mind, and hold all the team members accountable when it comes to demonstrating respect and tolerance in their teams and in their teamwork. Don't be afraid to invest in skills trainings, and I'm not talking about D&I skills trainings, but rather things like problem solving, conflict resolution, or communication, nonviolent communication. So soft skills that will really help them communicate better and make a more inclusive and diverse environment and culture. Because at the end of the day, and I think, and this is what I also wanted to prove to you, that agility, diversity, and inclusion, they have a lot in common, and there is a huge potential for them to work together. It's just about applying them properly, and communicating them clearly, so that you create the culture, the agile culture that we actually are aiming for. Thank you so much. In a second, I will look into the questions section. I know that we didn't have a lot of time to talk about it, and it's a very broad topic. I would love to hear also your opinions on this. If you're interested, you can add me on LinkedIn. Here's the QR code to my LinkedIn account. We can meet up for a cup of coffee if you're in Warsaw. Otherwise, we can also meet up for a cup of coffee online. I'll be happy to discuss this. And now I will actually stop sharing so that I can see the questions from you. Well, cultural background is it's a very broad aspect. So you can, for example, say that you're from Poland and you have been raised in the Polish culture, in, let's say, post-communist times. You probably, and again, I'm assuming, right? It doesn't have to be like that. But as an example, you have been raised as a Catholic. So, you're spending your Christmas on the 25th of December, and you're also spending your Easter. You have a lot of traditions around these holidays, for example. But if you go to China, let's say, then you will meet another culture, and this is, Chinese cultural background is totally different from your Polish cultural background. And already, these two cultures are not clashing, but they're just different. And this is how the differences affect diversity and inclusion. I don't know if I answered this, but there are plenty of different cultural backgrounds. And if you could see again the power flower with different petals, this is exactly where we come from. Okay, so can you speak a little more about neurodiversity at work? Yes, of course. So neurodiversity refers to all the disabilities, you could say, not disabilities, but all the neuropsychological differences. So you can have a person with bipolar syndrome, or you can have a person with dyslexia. So all these things should be, or these things are taken into this neurodiversity definition. What it means at work is that we need to, again, accept. That's the first step. And then the second step is to actually include these differences. And so we have to, and not only to say, okay, I know this person is suffering from this and that, but actually think how we can help this person to work better, be more effective, and feel included in our team. And maybe how maybe the perspective of this person, so a person with dyslexia, maybe they have a perspective on how they use certain applications, how they use certain products. I know that my brother, for example, has dyslexia, and I know how he uses certain things in certain products, or how he, writes messages. It's the case of, again, learning. So, for example, that this person might be just, communicating in very short sentences. That's okay. This is how this person is. We might not be like that, but we're accepting that, okay, this is the case. And that we also have to communicate with this person with short sentences, because this is what makes the work to this person easier. Do you see actual changes in Poland in the recent years regarding autism in workplace? I have to say that I'm not that much into the topic when it comes to any, statistics. My uncle actually is the founder of a foundation for people, for kids and people with autism, because they have a son who's suffering from it. And I know it's super difficult. There have been some improvement, just because, people started seeing autism, that it actually exists, and that people can normally live with that. But it's still, I think it's still very difficult, and I think there's still a lot of work to do when it comes to tolerance, and also with the current government, our current government, and with the policies they're concentrating on. So I won't be able to answer. I need to, dive deeper into this. Because I really, I only know the general situation. I don't know how it looks like in the workplace. So, but I will, if the person is here, I would love him or her to leave me your name so that I can reply after our meeting. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I hope that you enjoyed some things in the presentation, and I hope that you will take at least one thing for yourself from today. And again, if you want to discuss anything with me, just feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. But it has been great. So I look forward to the next meeting in December.